Welcome back to Business Owners Speak. Today, I'm thrilled to have with us Mike Antheil with Sailfish Solar. Mike, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you taking the time to be on. And so, like I do with everyone, if you could take a moment and tell us a little bit about you and the business.
So the company is Sailfish Solar. We are a solar project manager and installation company. I've actually been in the solar industry for 17 years, going on 18 years here in the state of Florida. And the market has changed drastically, over the past 17 years. I mean, there was a time where our whole goal was to actually develop the marketplace. We were going back in the early 2000s where we were writing all of the policies and all the laws that exist today and kind of bringing a marketplace to life. When I first started, I came from the world of finance, and the majority of the work that I was doing was actually in the Northeast United States, where they had proper policies in place, where they had kind of an infrastructure to support, distributed generations, which is what we would call distributed solar. And then, we kind of eventually worked our way south as the market became more, attractive here, as they had the right policies in place, and as the cost of electricity started to go up. In the Northeast United States, out west the United States, the cost of electricity is very expensive. In Florida, it's relatively cheap. So it really wasn't until about 2016 or so to where we hit what's called grid parity, to where the cost of producing your own power, your own solar power, was at parity or actually cost less than the cost of just buying from the utility company. So we started, very, very big on an industrial scale level, financing these big projects. And now we've worked our way down to, as a residential level here in the state of Florida. We do commercial work, big commercial facilities, as well as residential and kind of high-end residential. And we're getting some exciting stuff, going into next year too, which I'm happy to tell you about as well.
Yeah, and I want to hear about that. But first, how did you go from finance to solar?
Well, right, that's the right question. So, the truth is, what attracted me to solar was the finance side of it. Going back, I used to do commercial lending at Merrill Lynch, and how things paid for themselves, what the payback period, what the ROI was all that mattered, right? We didn't really necessarily look at the environmental benefits, although that's obviously wonderful. What we looked at was the bottom line. And as I started to really learn about the bottom line of renewable power, in particular solar power, became at least evident to me that this is something that, especially as it comes to scale, will overtake the current, scheme of how power is produced. Power electricity by its very nature wants to be consumed at the place that is produced. It doesn't want to travel over hundreds and hundreds of miles of power lines, right? And so the closer we could get the power production to where the consumption was taking place, the quicker that ROI was, the quicker that payback period was. So as a finance guy, and so we have another company called Energy Finance Group, but that's unrelated to this company. As a finance guy, it just made sense. And so, for me, it was a natural fit. It was actually when my son was born, back in the summer of 2008, I got out of Merrill Lynch and I went full speed into renewable power, and I've never looked back.
So I'm curious, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot with this question, but just overall market saturation, footprint, whatever you want to call it, in 2008 versus 2023. Is there a measurable or a number that you can put on that versus 15 years ago?
Sure. So, market penetration would be the right word for it. And so basically what that is how many eligible rooftops have solar on them. So when I started in the industry, the market penetration out in California, for example, was around 10%. So 1 out of every 10 houses that could theoretically have solar, or businesses that could have solar, had solar. Now in California, the market penetration is about 25%, give or take. 1 out of every 4, maybe 1 out of every 5 houses or businesses. Again, how you compare that to Florida? When we started in Florida, there were maybe a few thousand households, right? Which would be 0.01% in terms of market penetration.
Right.
Here in Florida today, we are at about 90,000 households, and we're just at about 1% market penetration, depending on how you look at the numbers. So even to catch up with California, heck, even to catch up with New Jersey, we've still got double-digit market penetration to catch up. But in Florida, the Sunshine State, we're pretty optimistic that we will catch up. And as we see utility scale solar come to be built and developed even more, we'll kind of catch up with those other states. But yeah, we've got a long way to go, and we've certainly come a long way.
Yeah, no doubt. Interesting. And what sounds like some really good opportunity out there if we're only at 1% or not even, right?
Yep.
All right. So you mentioned commercial and residential. Which areas is the larger mix of your business?
I would say it depends on how you look at it. In terms of clients, you know what I mean? Obviously, residential is going to be much higher because it's smaller system.
Right.
In terms of
Revenue-wise,
capacity of what we develop, solar is going to be bigger because commercial is going to be bigger because one commercial job can be the same as 100 residential jobs. We do like commercial. Commercial is kind of the low-hanging fruit in Florida at the moment. There are tax incentives as an individual homeowner. You have a 30% federal tax credit that comes off the top, of the cost of that solar system. As a commercial business owner, you get the 30% off the top as well, and then you're also eligible for an additional 10% if you use domestic products, which we do. And then you're also eligible for what's called MACRS, Modified Advanced Cost Recovery. It's basically accelerated depreciation. So when it's all said and done, a commercial business owner should realistically be able to cut about 50% of that upfront cost, within the first year, basically, of owning the system when you can take advantage of all those tax credits.
interesting. All right. So what's your sales force look like? Is it you? Are you out pounding the pavement, finding new clients, or do you have some team members that do that for you?
We do have a sales team in place. The sales team will bring me in when the questions get difficult, or when the client is given the tough questions. But I love it. You know what I mean? We could talk for hours, and you would see that I could talk about solar all day long. So for me, the harder the questions, the better. So, but no, I personally am running kind of the operation here. I'm managing, the larger projects, and I'm managing the relationships. We have relationships with builders in particular, with roofers and with architects, and that's kind of where I spend my time is managing those relationships.
Okay.
But by all means, the sales guys can bring me in, and I encourage them to do so.
Yeah, you're the closer.
Well, I can talk you out of the deal too, so you got to be careful. Sometimes I talk too much.
I don't know when to shut it down, right?
Right.
All right. So you mentioned some exciting things heading into 2024. What's next year look like for Sailfish Solar?
Well, two of the things that we're really excited about in terms of kind of new angles, new approaches to solar. The first is we've gotten really heavy into carport construction and pergola construction. So, an average, if your goal is strictly payback period and strictly ROI, a carport or a pergola might not necessarily be the best fit for you. The cheapest way to deliver solar is going to be bolted to your roof, which is kind of what solar is traditionally known for. But the solar pergolas and the carports have the additional advantage of now being able to provide shaded structures for somebody's backyard, or for their commercial facility, or whatever the case is, for their employees and so on. And so, when I started, the ROI, and I mean the payback period, back in 2009, a standard payback period would probably be around 12 years. And that means to get your money back, right? So you'll earn your money back in 12 years, and that's on equipment that's warranted to produce power for 25 years. Okay. Now, as time has gone by, now we're getting down to an ROI, or a payback period, of about 6.5, 7 years, right? If we throw the carport in, or the pergola in, now the payback is back up there to that 12-year number. But again, you've got this shade structure you wouldn't otherwise have. So we're really excited about that. We're getting into that. We're actually, we're getting our certified. We're basically become a building contractor here by the end of 2023. So we'll be able to hit 2024 rolling with those carports. We've built a lot already, but just using, partnering with another general contractor. And then the other exciting part in 2024 are solar integrated tiles. And so that's where, if you put it on a tile roof, you actually have the solar, is integrated directly into that tile, like a flat clay tile, or a flat concrete tile rather. So we're really excited about that. It's kind of the product that Tesla offers. Candidly, in my view, it's superior to what Tesla offers, but I'll save that for another day. But it's really cool, and there is kind of a demand that's coming for that. I think we're a little bit ahead of the marketplace. I would expect that that particular technology to take off in probably another 5 years or so. We're just trying to get positioned to kind of be here and have plenty of jobs under our belt once the demand does start to take off.
Yeah, very cool. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The ROI length shrinking, is that because production costs have just gotten more efficient, or why? What's the reason for that shrinking?
Right. So I mentioned the word grid parity a few minutes ago,
Yep.
and that really is the reason. Basically, the reason the ROI, because the reason it's become attractive in Florida since 2016, and it was attractive in California, let's say, since the early 2000s, is because of two factors. Number one, the cost of electricity, and number two, the cost to produce power. So as those two meet, as the cost of electricity goes up, which it absolutely has, in Florida, it's gone up 20% in the past 2 years, right? As the cost of electricity goes up and the cost to produce power comes down, you hit that point to where, we've achieved grid parity and it starts to make sense. I would caution though, and if you ever see me on social media, I actually poke fun at this quite a bit. I would caution, not to kind of, this isn't a sales pitch, but like the curve is over with. Like the cost of solar is not going down any further. You will see slightly more efficient equipment, but you're not going to see solar getting any cheaper. In fact, it's actually gone up by, we'll call it 10% or so over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
So the price for solar is actually starting to go back up a little bit with supply chain and all that. But we've kind of hit that bottom in terms of where we think the price drop is going to be. Now batteries, that's a different story. Cost of batteries will continue to go down. In fact, we just had another big drop in the cost of Tesla Powerwalls. But to answer your question, that's why the ROI has become faster. Cost of electricity goes up and the cost to produce power goes down.
Makes sense. All right, Mike. So as a business owner, as you look forward and understand, these weird times that we're in, I'm just curious, like, how do you work with your team to make sure you're staying in front of trends? Because you're obviously in an area and in a business where technology and products change a lot, and even a lot of unknowns, right? How do you guys stay on the front edge of that and continue to push that development with your team?
Well, I think industry knowledge is kind of the key there. You really have to be able to separate the things that sound like a good idea versus the things that can actually deliver, right?
Right.
Even that solar integrated tile that I was talking about a minute ago, there are no shortage of people who have kind of a cool idea like that. And there is no shortage. I mean, there are a lot of cool ideas out there. But the difference between a good idea and the ability to deliver it at scale is night and day. You know what I mean? There's so many approvals that you have to go through, especially here in Florida with wind zones, that you can't get caught up in the weeds of things that sound, really cool. You have to make sure this is stuff that we can actually deliver. So before we are able to put our stamp of approval on it, if you will, before we're able to put it on somebody's roof, I mean, it has to be something that again that can be delivered at scale and is actually proven, in other installations, that it can deliver the power and deliver everything that it's promising. So I think industry knowledge and really knowing, what's what is kind of the key there.
And being able to sift through the too good to be truths because they can't produce it at scale.
Right.
Something I think, and you just touched on it, that is, quite relevant down here. I think of, hurdles to your business or hurdles to a homeowner being able to do this. And I think of HOAs and wind. And walk me through how you kind of mitigate those challenges and what are the rules with what you can and can't do.
So with HOAs, we actually passed a law, and I want to say we did that in 2010. It's called the Florida Solar Homeowner Rights Act.
Okay.
It's Florida Statute 16304, and it very specifically says that HOAs cannot prevent you from putting solar on your roof, in particular, a southbound roof, because we want our solar panels, our solar arrays to face south if we can. I mentioned in the beginning, I mean, I did a lot of nonprofit work. I feel like I've kind of paid my dues and so on, but I did every bit of a decade of, running various trade associations, the Florida Alliance for Renewable Energy, the Florida Solar Energy Industries Association, Floridians for Solar Choice. Now we're members of the Florida Solar and Storage Association. So we did a ton of nonprofit work and no pay work, right? I don't know. I don't know who actually paid for the hours that I spent in Tallahassee running around the halls up there getting these laws in place. But anyway, so we put a lot of work in to kind of create that marketplace, and the HOA was an important hurdle that we were able to kind of take care of, like I said, back in 2010. The other question you had asked is about wind zone. So again, there we're not looking to drive policy there. We're really on the receiving end of policy when it comes to wind zones and so on. There are some government entities, Palm Beach County, candidly, they're probably taking it a step too far with some of the requirements that they're putting on us. But for the most part, we want the safest possible systems. And so it all boils down to engineering. Everything that we build, the product itself is going to be rated, at a Miami-Dade wind speed certification. So, when we're looking at solar panels, there is a difference between a panel that is good for Florida versus a panel that is good for, Michigan. We want thicker frames. We want the metal to be made out of a certain material. We want the rails, one of our suppliers is called Iron Ridge, right? The difference between an XR10 and an XR100, again, Florida is, we want those heavy rails, and in other states you don't necessarily need that because they're not faced with the same wind zones. So we're really just reliant on our engineers to make sure that everything we design is rated at 180 miles an hour plus. And to a certain extent, not that we want to be anarchist about it, but if we have winds at above 180 miles an hour, then the reality is we've kind of got bigger fish to fry at that point. So we meet those wind zone standards with everything that we build, and we count on Florida to make sure that the right standards are kind of put in place.
Sure. Okay. So Mike, how about some advice you'd maybe give another business owner, either you 15 years ago or someone thinking about making the leap to start their own business? How about some words of wisdom that you could share?
Well, so I am a little league coach, so I could probably give you more words of wisdom than you can fit on this video. I would say a couple things. If I were to talk to myself, I guess, I think the first is, you really have to keep your eyes on the prize, right? I mean, it's so incredibly easy to get knocked off course. I mean, just a minute ago, we were talking about different products, right? It's so incredibly easy to solicit and listen to advice from folks who might not necessarily share your vision or understand, what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And so that internal compass is pointing you in the right direction for a reason, and you have to have the fortitude to kind of listen to it sometimes. There's a ton of good advice out there. There are a ton of people to listen to. I mean, I myself was beyond blessed to have the best mentors in the business. The guys who taught me solar are still today the best in Florida, and there's no one better in the state of Florida as far as I'm concerned. But from a business standpoint, there are a lot of people who want to offer you advice. How do you grow? How do you grow your sales force? How do you do this? How do you do that? Blah, 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 blah. And you've got to rely on your own instinct if you understand your own vision and you understand what you're trying to accomplish. There is no shortage of people that want to kind of give you advice on what worked for them, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you and what you're trying to do. So that's number one. Yeah, like I said, know which advice matters. Number two, I'm a firm believer in this, and our sales guys get frustrated sometimes. But if you're familiar with the book From Good to Great, what he talks about there is the hedgehog concept. And what the hedgehog means is basically the one thing that your company does that is better than anyone else, right? And I am a firm believer in that. It would be incredibly easy for me to say, okay, to our sales force, now I want you guys to start selling air conditioners every time you're at the, talking to a customer about solar, because it goes hand in hand, right? Now I want you guys to start selling roofs. Now I want to start selling this or that or whatever the case is. We're happy to partner with companies who provide those services, but we are good at what we are good at, right? We are good at solar. We are good at solar electric PV in particular, and that's what we're focused on. So my second piece of advice is just don't get knocked off course from all the different things that you could do, and stay focused on the one thing that you were good at. So in a nutshell, those are two pieces of advice I'd give.
That's really good, and certainly things we see a lot of business owners struggle with. So Mike Antheil with Sailfish Solar, thank you so much for your time. interesting journey. And I think there's probably a lot of people that have you to thank for all that time you spent in Tallahassee, providing another source of energy and power for us to utilize. So we appreciate your time today and we wish you the best of luck.
All right, Matt. Thank you very much for having me.
You bet.